Okay, I hope you've all received the second document that I sent to Rabbi Smith, basically a set of questions regarding the second chapter of Menachem Aleph, the first book of Kings. And what we're going to do today is to have a continuation from where we left off last time, with the continuing saga of the 12-year-old king, King Solomon. If you remember the last time, he managed to talk down Adoniah from the altar in the Mishkan in Givon, and basically told him he wasn't going to kill him, and he told him to go to his house, and as long as he remained a loyal servant of the kingdom, there was nothing to worry about. So now we begin the intrigue of the second chapter. So the second chapter begins. It says that David, the days of David drew near that he would die, and as we know, David was destined to only live 70 years. And the reason why 70 years, if you remember, there's a medrash that says that when Hashem created the world and he created Adam HaRishon, he showed Adam HaRishon everything that would happen in the world, and Adam HaRishon saw that there was a person, a boy that was going to be born and die soon thereafter. And he asked about him, and he told him that this would be King David. And he asked them what would happen if he were to, if he were to live. And so Hashem told him what would happen. And so Adam, who was destined to live 1,000 years, basically offered 70 of his years to this person, so that he could accomplish what Hashem wanted him to accomplish in the world. So we know that that he received 70 years from Adam HaRishon, and we also know several things based upon other midrashim that David would die on a Shabbat. He asked several times if he could die after Shabbat, and Hashem said no. If you die before Shabbat, Hashem said no. So he knew he was going to die on a Shabbat. We also know that he died on the holiday of Shavuot. So basically, we have an exact date as to when David passed away. And since David didn't know exactly which Shabbat, he wanted to make sure that his son was instructed on what he should do in order to continue with what Hashem wanted the lineage of David to do. So in the beginning of chapter 2, he says to his son, I go the way of all the earth, meaning that I've lived 70 years. And we know that one of the Kapitel Tehillim that we normally read on Shabbat says, that if we live 70 years, and if by the strength of years we live up to 80 years, then we've actually achieved what was expected of man. And so here he's telling his son that he's achieving his 70th year. It will be the end for him, and so he wants to instruct him as to the things that he should do. The first thing that he tells him, he says, keep the charge of Hashem your God, to walk in his ways, keep his statutes and his commandments and his judgments and his testimonies, as it's written in the law of Moshe Rabbeinu. And if you do all those things, then you'll prosper in all the things that you do, wherever you turn, and that Hashem will continue his word, which he spoke concerning me, meaning that if your children take heed of their way and walk before Hashem in truth with all their heart and all their soul, then Hashem will always be there, will never fail you, and you will stay, you, meaning the lineage of David, will stay on the throne of Israel. Okay, so those are the things that he told him regarding what should be done in order for the lineage of David to continue. And then he goes and he speaks to him about three particular individuals, and if you remember, we talked about two of them. Can we mute? Let's see, can we mute?
On participants, you can press mute all.
Okay. All right. Okay, here we go. All right. So if you remember, we discussed at least two of the individuals that were involved in sort of the attempting to usurp the kingship of King Solomon. One of them was Yoav, and the second one was Abiathar. And then David also talks to his son about two other people that are close to him. So beginning with verse 5, David tells Solomon, you've got to take care of Yoav, this Ben Tzeruiah, and the reason why you have to do that is, and he gives a good reason, he killed in peace and by treachery those that he could have killed in war, meaning that he killed Avner and Amasa, and those two people, there were situations in which he could have killed them in a legal manner, but in reality he used a ruse, and he waited until it was actually, there was no war or no conflict between them, and he killed them by treachery. So therefore, this is the reason why he says they were killed in peace, when they could have actually been killed in fairly in a warlike situation. And because of that, he felt that Yoav was not the proper individual to, because anyone that the king puts up also is representative of the king, and such an individual would not be a good representation of the king, either to his men or to the country as well. The second person that he talks about is Shimi ben Gera. And if you remember the story with David, Shimi ben Gera was a faithful follower of Shaul HaMelech, King Saul, and he always questioned David's right to be king, and he cursed him. in such a way that um, it was very demeaning to David. But Shimei ben Gera repented his ways when he realized that, in fact, David was the legitimate king. And he had one other thing going for him, and that was that he was one of the teachers of King Solomon as a child, um, along with his father David. So there was a problem there that David swore that he would not kill Shimei ben Gera by the sword. And why was it, in the let's see, where was it? Yes, it's not here. It says in verse 8, Vayshava lo b'Hashem lemor im amitcha b'charev. It says, and I swore in the name of Hashem that I would not kill you by the sword. Now, as we had mentioned before, mentioned in the past, what was the sword? Why was the sword important? It says here that even though he promised not to kill him by the sword, this didn't imply, and again I'm reading from the Mikhaot Gedolot, that David was free to slay Shimei by any other means. The truth of the matter is that the king was vested with the power to execute anyone who rebels against him. And this was discussed, I believe, in Yehoshua chapter 1, verse 18. Unlike the court, however, he was only permitted to execute rebels with the sword. And the citations that are given here is the Rambam on the parak dealing with kings, from the Tosefta Sanhedrin, chapter 9, and Yerushalmi Sanhedrin, chapter 7. Thus David swore to Shimei that he would not put him to death with the sword as a rebel against the king. He should have been dispatched, but was not. Then another citation is given that according to the Zohar, volume 2, the phrase with the sword is connected to an earlier part of the verse, namely where he said, I swore by the name of Hashem that I would not kill you by the sword. And here they're saying, I swore by the sword. And they say that David's sword was engraved with the name of Hashem. And when he wished to swear, he would draw his sword and swear by it. There was an alternative explanation that he swore not to kill Shimei by the sword because Shimei had humiliated him with words. And indeed, they give an explanation here that Benayahu, who was dispatched to kill Shimei, uttered the name of Hashem, and that was the way that Shimei ben Gera was killed. All right, so that's the second individual that he spoke to King Shlomo HaMelech about. The last person was Barzillai, who showed
Ezra, can I say something?
Sure.
I just want to mention that killing by sword, the same request was made by Yoav when Shlomo sent somebody to kill him. He says, I want the king to swear that he's not going to kill me by the sword.
Right.
I just wanted to mention that, that's all.
Okay, no problem. As I said before, the last person that he spoke about was Barzillai Hagiladi, Barzillai from Gilad, and he tells King Shlomo to show Barzillai as much kindness as possible, because of the kindness that Barzillai showed David when King David was pursued by Avshalom, and because of that, Mida keneged Mida. This is basically what is happening in this particular situation. Now, as I mentioned before, we are now then told that David HaMelech passed away in verse 10, and says that David slept with his fathers and was buried in the city of David. And we're told that David reigned for 40 years, 7 years in Hebron and 33 years in Yerushalayim. It was the same number of years that Shlomo HaMelech actually reigned. The difference between the two was that David's 40 years were always turbulent, whereas we're told that once Shlomo HaMelech took care of the problems that he had amongst these people that we just talked about, he had a very secure and very quiet reign during his time. Now we begin again the intrigue, starting with verse 13 of this chapter. Adoniyahu rears his ugly head again into the situation. And so he comes to Bathsheba, and he says to her, he wants to talk to her. And she, of course, knowing the entire situation from before, is very apprehensive, and she asks, do you come in peace? And he says, yes, in peace. He says, I want to ask you something. I would like you to approach the king for me and ask him a favor. Okay, so she asks, what is that favor? And he basically says, I would like him to give Avishag the Shunammite to me as a wife. And he then goes into this soliloquy in which he says, as you know, the kingship was really mine and everyone was with me, but God chose to change the situation at the very end, and he took the kingship from me and he gave it to my brother. And he says, I'm okay with that, but what I would like to have is, if you don't mind, speak to the king and ask him to give me Avishag the Shunammite as a wife. Now, on many levels, this is a problem, because as we know, any item, and I don't consider Avishag to be an item, but anything that belongs to the king, whether his wives, concubines, whatever, his scepter, his sword, etc. Once it's given, the only person who can actually inherit those things is the next king. Anyone else taking a hold of these things is in fact a problem, because it's an indication to anyone who sees this as if he has gotten authority in the name of the king to do whatever needs to be done. However, Bathsheba doesn't realize this, and so when she approaches her son, King Shlomo HaMelech is willing to do anything that he can for his mother, and he says to her, Ask me anything that you wish, and I will not refuse you. She approaches him and she says, I want to just ask you a small favor, okay? One small petition. And he says, okay, so what is it? And she says, let Avishag the Shunamite be given to Adoniyahu, your brother, as a wife. And of course, as soon as she says that, Shlomo HaMelech realizes the entire gravity of the situation, and he just says, so why don't you ask me to give Avishag to Adoniyahu? Adoniyahu, if you remember, Adoniyahu says, why don't you just ask me to give the kingdom to my elder brother, and Aviatar the priest to become basically the Kohen Gadol, or even to give for the kingdom, and also to Yoav ben Suya. He realizes that the only way that this request can have come, other than when he questioned his mother, that this was again the same cabal, the same group of people that tried to do him in before are now trying again. And because of that, he realizes that he must take care of all these of this problem. So if you give me a second, I'm trying to find. So Rashi basically says Solomon knew from the moment a commoner uses the scepter or any personal property of the king, that is the beginning of authority and sovereignty. And Solomon's reference to Aviatar the priest and Yoav the son of Zeruiah substantiate the opinion that Bathsheba had related all the details of her conversation with Adoniyahu, and Solomon concluded therefore that Aviatar and Yoav had advised Adoniyahu to marry Avishag, and they were the ones referred to by Adoniyahu when he said, all Israel sets their face on me, and that I should reign. So this is part of his speech when he was giving his take on why he should be given Avishag as a wife. So now, from that point on, Shlomo HaMelech swears by God that Adoniah has forsaken his life, as this goes against his pledge of loyalty to the king. So if you remember, at the very end of the first chapter, the king had said to Adoniah, return back to your house, just live your life as a loyal citizen, and nothing will happen to you. But this, in fact, was something that the king considered to be very disloyal, and so therefore he had forsaken his life. So he sent Beniyahu to kill Adoniyahu, since his respect for Avishag was nothing but a pretext to wanting the throne of David for himself. He then also banishes Aviatar to his fields in Anatot, because, and again, there are several things that are playing over here. If you're that are playing in the case of Aviatar. If you remember, he was the sole survivor from the city of Nov, and so the king Solomon was very cognizant of of this, and he was also very cognizant of the fact that Aviatar also was a loyal servant to his father David until the very, very end. pledged himself to Adoniyahu. And so therefore, killing him would be completing the task that King Saul would have done, and he was not ready to have that happen. And so therefore he banished him to Anatot, where he had his house, and he told them basically, you can go anywhere in the city and into your fields, but anything outside of that you are not allowed to do. And in that way, he did not kill Aviatar. We all know that Aviatar probably lived a short life, probably because of the curse that was put on the descendants of Eli, and Aviatar was in fact a descendant of Eli Cohen. Now, after what has happened over here, after Adoniyahu was killed by Benayahu, and also after Aviatar had been banished, Yoav hears all that has happened, and he does exactly the same thing that Adoniah did at the end of chapter 1. Namely, he runs to Givon and grabs a hold of the horns of the altar there. Again, this is, as I mentioned the last time, this is sort of reminiscent of the fact that he's going there as a form of sanctuary, to make sure that that he is not killed. So we are now at verse 29 of chapter 2, and it was told, Shlomo HaMelech was told that Yoav had fled to the tabernacle in Givon, and basically was using the same methodology that Adoniyahu had used. And so Shlomo HaMelech sends Benayahu to go and take care of him, to dispatch Yoav. So Benayahu comes to the tabernacle, namely to the altar there, and he says to Yoav, the king tells you to come, and Yoav refuses and says that I would rather that I die here. And so Benayahu returns back to the king, and he tells him exactly what Yoav has said. So the king basically says, okay, so Yoav has told you you'd rather die there, so go ahead, kill him there. Kill him there, bury him there, take away the innocent blood which Yoav has shed from me and from my father's house. And again, this is in reference to Avner and Amasa, both of them who had died by the hands of Yoav, not in what normally would be a legal way. And the king also explains this. He says that the Lord shall return his blood upon his head, that he fell upon two men who were more righteous better than he, and killed them by the sword. And my father did not know this, didn't know that these things happened. And who are these two people? Avner, the son of Ner, the captain of the host, and Amasa, the son of Yeter, the captain of the host of Yehudah. And their blood shall return upon the head of Yoav and upon the heads of his seed forever. But upon David and upon his seed and upon his house and upon his throne, there'll be peace forever from the Lord. So, now, Yoav said that he would not. So Benaiah goes back and basically tries to talk to Yoav, and he says to him, come down again, and of course he refuses again. He says, the only way that I will leave, and this is again quoted in the Mikaot Gedolot according to Rashi. Yoav said that he would not leave, that he would not accept the two punishments that were placed upon him through the curses that David had cursed him after the death of Avner. And these curses, according to David, should fall upon the head of Yoav. And so Yoav basically says, if Solomon the king will accept these curses upon himself, and afterward, then I will come out. But if you remember, the king basically said to Benaiah, the first time when he reported what was said, he said, then do as he says, kill him, and I will accept the curses upon myself. Therefore, all these curses became attached to the offspring of David. Uzziah became a leper. This is according to Divrei Hayamim, Chronicles 2. Asa leaned on a staff. Yehoiakim fell by the sword. This is as described by Yirmiyah, chapter 22. And one who lacked bread was Tzidkiah, and this again is covered in the second book of Kings, chapter 25. So, since the king, according to some of the commentaries, the King Solomon accepted these upon himself, then Yoav came out and was killed by Benaiah. Others say that he really did not accept these curses upon him. So in either case, Yoav thought that these curses had been lifted from him, and so therefore he came out of the tabernacle, out of the Mishkan, and was killed and buried. Then we have a line that appears, verse 35, in which now that Yoav has passed away, now that Aviatar has been banished to Anatot, the king put Benaiah, the son of Jehoiada, in his place as the captain of the host, and Sadok was made the Kohen Gadol in place of Aviatar. And the last person that he had to deal with was, of course, Shimi ben Gera. And so the king called in Shimi, and if I were Shimi, I wouldn't know what what to expect. Number one, Solomon was his student, and so perhaps he was calling him in to speak to him as a student, former student to his teacher. Perhaps he came a little bit with trepidation, but whatever the case is, Shimei came, and the king basically said to him, build for yourself a house in Jerusalem and dwell there, and don't move from there. Okay, so basically what he's saying is, all right, you're now basically under house arrest, so to speak. And here are the parameters. It said, and it shall be that on the day that you go out and you pass over the Kidron Valley, you shall know for certain that you shall surely die, and your blood will be upon your head. Now, I think by then Shimei realized what was happening, and he said to him, okay, what you said is good. As my lord the king has said, so will your servant do. And so Shimei actually built a house in Jerusalem, and he stayed there for a long time. They don't say how long it was. All they say was that he was there. Now, something happened that caused Shimei to trespass on his word. It says here that after 3 years had passed, so for 3 years everything seemed to be going okay, that after 3 years, 2 of Shimei's slaves ran to Achish, the king of Gath. So if you know anything about the lay of the land, if you know where Jerusalem is on the map of Israel, Gath is to the south and a little bit to the east of Jerusalem. So Shimei went after his slaves, okay, and I'm trying to remember, and I can see if I have a map over here. Jerusalem, no, it's not. Yes, the Kidron is to the south of Jerusalem, and you'd have to pass over the Kidron in order to go to Gath, to retrieve your slaves. And so in having done so, Shimei has basically overstepped the words of Shlomo HaMelech. And so we have the next exchange that occurred. So in verse 41, it says, and it was told to Shlomo that Shimei ben Gera had gone from Jerusalem to Gath and had returned. And then the king sent for and called for Shimei, and he said to him, did I not make you swear by the Lord and forewarned you, saying, on the day you go out and go here or there, know for certain that you shall surely die? And you said to me, the word is good, that I have accepted. So here we have the situation in which basically in the same way that Shimei had cursed David using words, it was his own words, namely accepting the oath not to cross the Kidron. It's his own words that bring about his own death. Then a very odd verse appears in here. It says that right after he said, after he said those things, and the king said to Shimei, you know all the wickedness which your heart knew secretly, and that what you did to David my father, namely by cursing him, and the Lord shall return your wickedness upon your own head. And then it says, והמלך שלמה ברוך, וכיסא דוד יהיה נכון לפני השם עד עולם. So it says that the translation says, and the king shall be blessed, and the throne of David shall be established before the Lord forever. Now, what exactly does that mean? So the Metzudat David gives the following explanation for the first part of the verse, which is Melech Shlomo Baruch, and King Solomon shall be blessed. It says here that all will bless Solomon when they become aware of the complete impartiality in executing Shimei, the son of Gera, his beloved teacher, for violating the oath of the Lord. So you would think, part of the Torah basically says, tzedek tzedek tirdof, you shall pursue justice, and that one should not take into account the fact that an individual is rich or an individual is poor, or whether one knows an individual or one doesn't know an individual. The law shall be applied impartially to all individuals. And here, the most beloved teacher of the king, namely Shimei ben Gera, did something wrong, and he violated the word of the king, and therefore he did a treasonous act, and treason demands the death penalty. And so the question that one can ask is, really, will the king apply the death penalty here, because Shimei is such an important person to him? He's his teacher. And the answer is yes, because he executed Shimei just like he would execute anyone else who acted in a treasonous manner. And so the people realized that Shlomo HaMelech actually applied the law equally to everyone, and he didn't take into account that this individual was dear to him. And what was the second part of the statement here? It says, "V'chisei David yihye nachon lifnei Hashem ad olam," and the throne of David shall be established before the Lord forever. Okay. And here again, the Malbim, sorry, not the Malbim, but the Metzudat David, and also the Abarbanel states the following: since his regretful brush with David played no direct part in Shimei's death, David could not be held responsible for any appreciable degree. It may therefore be said that David fulfilled his vow not to kill Shimei. Consequently, in recognition of his kindness and piety, the throne of David shall be established before the Lord forever. So, in other words, here, since Shimei actually overstepped the edict of Shlomo HaMelech and not David, Shlomo HaMelech is the one who is responsible for executing him and not David. And so therefore, no blame can be placed upon David for the death of Shimei, and therefore he is blameless in the death of Shimei ben Gera. And so David kept his word, and because of that, in response, Hashem will make sure that his his lineage will continue forever. And that ends the chapter 2. And the last statement that is made in verse 46, and says, "In the kingdom," meaning the kingdom of Shlomo, was established, or the kingdom of David was established in the hands of Shlomo HaMelech. And with that, we end the second chapter. And when Rabbi Smith returns, we'll begin with the third chapter, which is the start of the connection of Shlomo HaMelech with the princess of Egypt. Probably another one of the marriages that was made to ensure the viability of the kingdom, and to create positive ties with the countries that were surrounding Israel, Israel at the time. Are there any questions? Because I'm done with the end of the second chapter. Hopefully, if there are any questions, please ask. Otherwise, I will end the presentation. And I apologize. I apologize to Bezalel for not letting you in earlier.
Ezra?
Yeah.
Why is it that Shimei couldn't have notified King Shlomo regarding his slaves that he'd have to leave Jerusalem in order to retrieve them? And maybe an exception could have been made at that point. Why didn't he just do that?
I asked the same question, and I really don't have an answer for that. It's
the web was down. The internet was down. He couldn't text them. That was it.
I really don't know. It's possible that, there are times when people do things, absent-mindedly, and they don't realize what has happened until after the fact. It is possible that in this situation, he crossed the Kidron and realized, he said, "Oh my God." He said, "Well, I'll go get them and I'll deal with it when I get back." I mean, those are possibilities, but nobody knows for sure. Hashem could have basically forced the situation so that he can, it went out of his mind, and that's the reason why. But should he have done? Because I asked the same question. I said, why didn't he? If he knew that this is going to happen, send word to the king and say, "Hey, this is the situation. Can I leave to go and get them?" Maybe the king would have said, "Listen, send other people to go instead of you to go and get them." Whatever the case may be. We don't know. We weren't there. All we know is what we have, namely that he didn't do it and he paid the price.
The other thing I want to ask is, in Tehillim, it says that we lived the 70 and I'm sorry, was it 70 and then 80 would be an exception?
Right.
Why is it that we say that we're supposed to live to 120?
I think in the originally we were to 120, but then Hashem, from what I remember, the commentaries, Hashem reduced the number of years of man down to 70 or 80. But we have you have examples of people living to the age of 100 and 105.
Well, I think they were saying derech. They were talking more generally, like the lifespan of a person is. So in those days, people were barely making it to 60, 70. Baruch Hashem, today we're heading to 80 and 90
or more.
Hey, right.
I mean,
we have a lot.
Right, we have a lot of people that I mean, the oldest member of the generation of the Civil War, passed away at the age of 105, something like that. We have people who passed away from the generation of World War I that lived into the 113, 114 years old. So there is a possibility there, people still do it. It's not that they don't, but in those days, if you made it to 70, you're very lucky. Just think about the sanitary conditions, what people had in terms of food to eat, the situation, the political situation that existed, etc. So yeah, if you made it to 70 years old, you were you were
Respected.
blessed. You were blessed.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
And today we are doubly blessed. Really.
Baruch Hashem.
Oh, I don't have a question so much. I just wanted to thank you. These were very, very enjoyable 2 days and listening to it. That's all. And we learned a lot. Thank you.
That's the call.
I appreciate it, and I hope that by the time I'm going